Welcome to the CFITrainer.net podcast. Today, we talk to Texas Ranger Sergeant Drew Pilkington about incendiary fires as a cover for murder. He'll discuss a tragic quadruple domestic violence homicide where a fire also occurred. A little later in the podcast, we'll explain how a new CFITrainer.net feature, Official Transcripts, can help you provide verified documentation of your training. We'll close with recent news stories about fires sparked by pyrotechnics at gender reveal parties. As always, we hope you'll share the podcast with your peers or reach out to us via the feedback form on this page. Fatal fires are always devastating and probably one of the toughest things to cope with in the fire service. But when that fire may be a cover for another crime like murder, the investigation takes on a new dimension. With us today to talk about fire as a cover for murder is Texas Ranger Sergeant Drew Pilkington of the Texas Department of Public Safety. He's been with the Texas DPS for 22 years, first as a highway patrol trooper, then a criminal investigation division agent, and now as a Texas Ranger. He also serves on the statewide Texas Rangers Major Crime Scene Team. Sergeant Pilkington is a fire and arson investigator with the Victoria County Fire Marshal's Office and a Victoria County Fire Department volunteer firefighter. He's an IAAI FIT and an IAAI ECT, as well as a commissioned Texas fire and arson investigator, fire instructor, and police instructor. Sergeant Pilkington, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you.
It's good to have you on, and we appreciate your time. So a lot of people don't get to go to Texas, but we hear a whole lot about your country. So why don't you tell us what it's like to work in Texas, in your area specifically, for the Rangers?
It's really good. I'm located in South Texas. And so Texas, obviously, as large as it is, the different regions and different areas has its own diversities and advantages. Down here, we deal a lot more with heat and humidity. But it's a really good area. It's been a great career with the Department of Public Safety. We're the state police of Texas, and particularly in the Texas Rangers, we're the primary criminal investigative agency for the state. We assist the local agencies in areas that they may not have expertise, experience, training, or equipment. And most of my days are assisting local sheriff's office and police departments with criminal investigations. Most of them are violent or heinous crimes, and others are just complex, whether it be a white collar or public corruption type crime.
All right. Thanks for that background. So let's get to our focus now and talk about fire investigations when a fatality is involved. How does that change your investigation?
In Texas, we have the State Fire Marshal's Office, which is they do the primary origin and cause investigations. And once a fatality or a death has been discovered within the fire, they usually utilize the Texas Rangers or local agency to then assist with that death investigation. That's where I come in with the state, with the Texas Rangers, to assist with not just the death investigation, but more specifically focusing if it is a homicidal death.
So a fire investigator is out there on the scene. They find a body. They put out a phone call, and you head out?
That's correct. For the most part, my local agencies keep me aware of what's going on. Regular fires, they're not just calling me, telling me, hey, there's a regular fire, but once a dispatcher, once a investigator learns that there's been a body discovered, then there's a death within the fire, they'll notify me. If they haven't reached out to the State Fire Marshal's Office themselves, I'll reach out to them. And we have a cooperative working response. They respond. I'll assist with processing the scene for them and digging out the fire. When we get to the body, we work the body together, and then particularly once it becomes a homicide, determined homicide through obvious means or autopsy, I work with then the local, whether it's a sheriff's department or police department, in furthering that criminal investigation.
So you're at the scene now. There's a fatality. What changes physically? I mean, is there, is the scene more secure? What do you do differently?
The main thing is to slow down. Now the focus is particular attention to around the body's mechanism of injury, other items that may be involved, starting to look at the environment and the position, and was this accidental? Was it in the midst of an escape, or could this have been an intentional act?
Yeah, and our conversation today is about how people try to cover up homicide by using fire, and I'm thinking we'll get into a little bit of that as we move ahead here. But can you give us an outline of a death investigation process? So now that there's this fatality, you've gotten to the body. Who are the different people that are involved, and what are their roles? How do they interact?
So in the main part, we start off with obviously the fire investigator, and taking that one step back to the line firefighter who discovered the body, and whether it was discovered during suppression or during overhaul, or unfortunately if it was missed and then discovered a little bit later. So we have to figure out who discovered the body, and understanding the surroundings. That area immediately around the body is so important and contains so much evidence. And that's when I say we slow down. That's we really focus on the type of evidence that you're looking for in the sifting and going through the debris to look for it. It might even be as small as a bullet projectile, let alone a sharp object or blunt force object. So then we step next to the fire investigator. Now the fire investigator deals with the body, and then some investigators are commissioned law enforcement or sworn law enforcement. Some are purely just investigators. So that determines the role of how much or how much authority I have to bring as a police officer to that investigation, or how much of a cooperative working effort we're going to have, because we can both, criminally work that fire together.
What other folks show up supporting your investigation from a forensics perspective?
Depending on the area, a local entity, whoever is a jurisdiction, have an authority. Like I said, it's going to be the sheriff's office if it's in an unincorporated area, or a police department. And their detectives, their homicide detectives will show up. Most of my agencies, we're dealing with agencies that might have 6 to 8 officers. So they don't have the means or ability to have a dedicated crime scene unit. Larger ones do. They'll bring their crime scene unit, crime scene techs out. But for the most part, I'm working hand in hand with just another homicide investigator, who is the one typically processing evidence, collecting fingerprints, collecting evidence. So there's a lot of educating going on and directing on how I want them to collect the evidence to ensure that it's collected properly, packaged properly, preserved.
Yeah, as it seems these days, the fire investigator's role in the leadership becomes bigger and bigger all the time, and the amount of information you need to have. So interesting. I've spoken to quite a few people who say, we wish we had these big units, but a lot of times we're out doing all of this ourselves. So
yes, and educating, and you have those that want to help, and it's that fine line of, understand you want to help, but then to preserve the integrity of the evidence, the collection, the processing, to ensure that it's admitted into court. It's kind of like, please let me do my job.
Well, that might lead us into my next question, which was, about common pitfalls when there's been a fire death.
One of the largest is moving the body prematurely or unnecessarily, destroying evidence unintentionally.
Okay. Let's talk specifically about incendiary fire being used to cover up a homicide or as an actual method of homicide. How does an investigator identify that this has happened rather than the person dying from a fire in an accidental or unintentional manner?
One of the most pronounced ways is through the postmortem examination, which particularly would be the autopsy.
Okay.
And using the